to give an answer, give a defense to others who may ask concerning the hope that is in us with meekness, that's gentleness, and fear, realizing the seriousness of these issues. Last week in a sermon on deacons, I mistakenly said that we have 5 deacons currently. I mean that we have 6. The correct answer is that we have 5 deacons. And shortly, Lord willing, we'll have 7 deacons. So we're looking forward to that. We have 5 and we'll have 7. And then this morning I misspoke with regard to Esau. And Brother Don was good enough to correct me. And what he did, he came up in the foyer and put a finger in my face and let me have it. And I mean, he had me back against the wall like this. And he said that Esau doesn't mean red, it means hairy. And that Edom means red. That would be the descendants of Esau. He's exactly right. Now, do you believe that that's the way he approached me? Well, if you do, I've got some land. I've got a bridge for you out near San Francisco I'd like to get rid of. This evening, I want to continue with you in our series on Bible questions and answers. And again, I thank you for submitting tremendous questions. I was talking with someone right before services who had submitted a question, and I made the observation that right now the questions are coming in a little faster than I'm answering, faster than the sermons to answer them. And I guess that's a good problem to have, because in my view, that shows an interest in these important subjects. When we stop asking questions, folks, I'm afraid it's because we no longer really care what the answers are. So as long as we're asking good questions, that's a healthy sign in any congregation. And I appreciate your questions. This question tonight, what does the Bible say about gossip, is a great question. Because we're living in an age, in an age of technology, where it is easier to gossip perhaps than it has ever been. You thought of that? It's easy to gossip. Social media has made it possible to not only gossip to one person, but to gossip to a group of people, and to do so in a controlled, somewhat protective manner. And I'm afraid that has opened the door to a lot of abuse with regard to gossip. You've got to really be careful with the use of social media. It's a good tool, good thing if used properly, but gossiping is a very, very serious matter. So I thought what we should do in answering this question is we're going to look together at the scriptures that deal with gossip in the Bible. And you won't always see it called by that name. There are some other names by which gossip is referred to. One of them is slander. That word may seem a little more serious because we have a legal corresponding set of laws with regard to slander, and there was that way in the old law, in the law of Moses. You can actually be fined or otherwise sanctioned legally for committing the tort or sometimes the crime of slander. Very serious. Sometimes you'll see in the Bible the word whisperings, which to utter that word itself, I think, suggests something of the nature of what is involved in that. Or backbitings. To bite one's back is to use one's words or voice or communications sort of behind their back in a way that is harmful or hurtful to them. Sometimes we see the phrase corrupt speech. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth. So these words help us to visualize the concept involved, even if we don't, in our particular translation, see the word gossip all of the time. So let's look at some of these passages and see what we can glean from them. The first one is from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul is writing to the church at Corinth. In verse 20 beginning, he says, "For I fear, lest by any means when I come, I should find you not such as I would, and should myself be found of you such as ye would not, lest by any means there should be strife, jealousy, wraths, factions, backbitings, there's your word, and whisperings, another word, swellings, tumults. What was Paul saying there? You know, we recently completed a series of sermons on 1 Corinthians, and we talked a good bit about the church there and some of the issues that were involved. There was a great deal of pride. And there was also a problem with speaking ill of others in the congregation, sometimes the speaking ill of the Apostle Paul. And he was sensitive to that. He recognized the danger in that. What he's saying is, I'm concerned that when I come there in person, I'm going to find this going on. I'm going to find you not the way I would want you. And the people who are doing this are going to find me not the way they're going to want to see me, too. That's what Paul is saying. Whisperings and backbitings going on. In a congregation, this can be a deadly problem. If you cannot say something to a person's face in Christian love, in charity, in goodwill toward that person, ask yourself, what business do I have saying it behind their back? Now that's true with regard to social media too. I get shocked at the things that get posted on social media that I just know in my heart that that person would never say something like that to someone's face. We get very brave sitting behind a keyboard somewhere. But just ask yourself, would I say this to the person's face? If the Apostle Paul were to walk in here, would I talk that way about him to his face? Or some other gospel preacher, or an elder, or a deacon in the church, or one of their wives, or family members, or a brother or sister in Christ? If I have something to say about them, check off the box that says, I will say it to their face. And I'll do it honorably and straightforwardly. That's an important lesson from the church at Corinth. Notice also to the church at Ephesus, chapter 4, verse 29. Paul says, let no corrupt speech. The word corrupt, as it suggests, is a perversion, a corruption, something that is not righteous and true, on the mark. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth. Now, if that's all he had said, that would be a very challenging and broad statement. It's true, nonetheless. But he gives us a little insight by way of a contrast. He says, but such as is good for edifying as the need may be, edifying as the need may be, and that it may give grace to them that hear. Edifying means building up, teaching, encouraging. What Paul is saying is, check your speech, check what you're saying about other people. Don't let anything corrupt get out between your lips. Let it not proceed out of your mouth. Well, how do I know if it is corrupt, Paul? Well, he says, I'm going to give you a test. Number one, does it edify? Such as is good for edifying. Is this something that would build the person up, teach them, make them a better person? That's the test. And then the second one is that it may give grace to them that hear. Don't we all need grace? Is there anybody here who doesn't need grace? Doesn't the Bible teach that we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ? Ephesians chapter 2. I mean, without grace, we would be in a terrible, terrible state. No hope. I can only hope that when people talk about me in my absence, they're going to show a little grace, mercy, goodwill, forbearance, That's the idea that Paul is suggesting here. Make sure when you talk about somebody that it is good for edifying and it's good for grace to those who hear it. Now notice, the person you're talking about may not be the one hearing it. He doesn't say that speech would be heard by the person that you're referring to. He says to them that hear, to whoever hears. Okay? You may talk about somebody who's not even a member of this congregation, somebody from your past or some who lives somewhere else, not even involved here. Make sure that whatever you say is going to be good for those who hear it. Now, does that mean that we can never speak critically of a person? I hope not, because the Apostle Paul did that. But he did it in a constructive, teaching way. He would even call names, you remember? And John would do likewise. These New Testament writers, Diotrephes, for example, was referred to. Or Alexander the coppersmith, Paul said, who did me much evil, he said. These were names that were called out, but they were done in a constructive, scriptural way to advance the cause of Christ and not to gossip or to just badmouth somebody. It's for teaching. It's for grace. All right? Next, Exodus. You know, the Old Testament is full of passages with regard to the use of the tongue. In chapter 23, Moses wrote, "Thou shalt not take up a false report. Put not thy hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." Now, we've heard a lot about fake news in recent years, and there is a lot of fake news. All right? Now, if I'm watching a news broadcast and I hear something, how do I know before I start repeating it to other people that it's true? Doesn't it involve some level of personal responsibility on my part to not just believe everything that I hear before I start spreading it around? Otherwise, I am taking up a false report, and I'm encouraging false reporting because I am amplifying and spreading it on. That was against the law under the law of Moses. Do not do that, he said. Make sure that when you repeat something, it's true. Now, I want to warn all of us about something. This passage does not say that if it's true, we should repeat it. It doesn't say just because something's true, we should pass it on. But it does say that if it's false, do not help to spread it. And that, brethren, puts a personal responsibility upon each one of us to weed out the fake news and be careful what it is that we are passing along, spreading, that it's not a false report. In James chapter 1, James deals with the use of the tongue. And these are some of the most pointed verses in all of the Bible because he rightly points out that the tongue can no man tame. It's never going to get to a point where we can let up our guard on the use of our tongue. It's always going to, no matter how well disciplined you may be, you're always going to have to watch your tongue. It's just part of the Christian life, right till death. He says, if any man thinketh himself to be religious, while he bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his heart, this man's religion is what? Vain, useless. Useless. We may think we are the most pious, religious, devout person on the face of the earth, but if we do not bridle our tongue, now picture the bridle that goes into a horse's mouth. What's it for? It is to keep that horse from doing whatever it wants to do. If we don't bridle our tongue, then all of this piety is useless. That's what James is saying. Dear brethren, we must not gossip. We must not take up false reports about others and spread them. We must not slander or allow corrupt speech. We must bridle our tongue and be careful what we say. Make sure it's good for teaching, for edifying, and that it gives grace to them that hear. Also in James chapter 4, he says, "Speak not one against another, brethren. He that speaketh against a brother or judgeth his brother speaketh against the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judgest the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge." See how he puts us into proper perspective. If we're going to set ourselves up as judges, we're really taking the place of God. We need to be very, very careful about that. Let God be the judge. If we're going to make judgments, make sure that they mirror what God has already judged. As Jesus would say, judge righteous judgment. Don't set yourself up as the judge. God is the judge. Now, in Leviticus also, going back to the old law, Moses wrote, "Thou shalt not go up and down as a tale bearer." There's another word. A bearer of tales is someone who carries stories about other people. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people. Neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am Jehovah. Notice how God puts his stamp of authority on this commandment, as is really true with all of them in the law of God. Let's make sure that we are not gaining some kind of perverse pleasure from always being the one with the news about our brothers and sisters. The talebearer who always has something to say, some story that nobody else has heard about our brother or sister in Christ. The book of Proverbs has some tremendous passages on gossiping. You already knew that. If you're interested in the subject of gossip in terms of trying to improve this aspect of your life, and don't mistake me, this is an effort. It's going to require a study. If you find yourself, as you think about it, engaging in gossip, you think back, you know what, I've been guilty of this. Whether it's on Facebook or in personal conversation, whatever it is. I have news for you. It's not easy to break that habit. One thing I would suggest is a careful reading and rereading of the book of Proverbs. When I was a student at Freed Hardeman, I had to take a course called General Biology. Tristan, did you have to take General Biology? And you kind of shook your head like, yeah. Not an easy course, not for me at least. It was not the kind of course I really enjoyed. Now, we have some scientists in the auditorium, and they love it. Man, I struggled with General Biology. Dr. Milton Tucker, who taught that course, would start each class by reading a chapter from the book of Proverbs. Isn't that cool? You might think, what's that got to do with biology? Try it sometime. Start your day by reading a chapter from the book of Proverbs and see how that affects your day. It's a tremendous thing. I learned a great appreciation for the book of Proverbs that way. Well, listen to this statement from Proverbs chapter 10. He that hideth hatred is of lying lips, and he that uttereth a slander is a fool. Now, this is God speaking by inspiration. We don't call people fools. but we sure stand up and take notice when God does. God knows what is foolish. And he says if we are uttering slander, we are a fool. Something very, very serious about that. In the multitude of words, he says, there wanteth not transgression. But he that refraineth his lips doeth wisely. Have you ever noticed when somebody is accused of wrongdoing, and you have the feeling they're probably guilty, that when they get on the stand or whenever they start defending themselves, do you notice how much they talk? I mean, they just talk. That's one of the surest signs of guilt. You know what the innocent man says? Very little. In the multitude of words there wanteth not transgression. You're looking for sin, you're going to find it in the person who just talk. But he that refraineth his lips doeth wisely. So the next time you see something on Facebook and you're ready to sit down and rattle off a scorching reply, you just remember this verse. He that refraineth his keyboard doeth wisely. Gossip. Proverbs chapter 11 also contains this statement, verse 9, with his mouth the godless man destroyeth his neighbor. Now in just a moment as we prepare to close this, I'm going to ask you to think with me about why gossip is so bad. I mean, why are there so many passages on this? Well, think of this. With his mouth, the godless man destroyeth his neighbor. Now, who created the neighbor? God. The power of the voice of God. Think of that. God created the universe with his words. He spoke it into existence. But he has given us the power to destroy our neighbor with our mouth. That's a power we should never exercise. But through knowledge shall the righteous be delivered. Verse 13 says, he that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. But he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth a matter. Have you ever had someone come up to you and just can't wait to tell you about brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so, something bad that they've done? You know the problem with that person? They're doing that about you when you leave. That's the way they're talking about you when they're talking with somebody else. Because it's a habit. They are a talebearer. The best thing you can do for them is to kindly and gently let them know, I'm not interested in hearing that. Don't listen to it. Don't listen to gossip. Proverbs chapter 11. And Proverbs chapter 16, verse 28, a perverse man scattereth abroad strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. You can just picture the farmer in that day who would carry a bag of seeds with his arm outstretched like this, and it'd be a large bag of seeds, and he'd take his other hand and grab a handful of seeds, and he would scatter the seed. And he would get really good at where that seed would land and so on. It was a real art form. That's the image. A perverse man scattereth abroad strife. Everywhere he goes, he's a gossiper. And what is he doing? He is separating chief friends. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a really close friend suddenly turn on you? I've had that happen before. And upon investigation, which sometimes is difficult to do, often you will find out it's because of something that somebody else said. Gossip separates chief friends, the best of friends. And in chapter 17, verse 9, he that covereth a transgression seeketh love, but he that harpeth on a matter separateth chief friends. Let me just suggest something to us. Folks, Isn't it just barely possible that Brother X over here who has a particular fault, isn't it just possible that they will grow out of it? Do I have to expose every fault, every sin, every bad thing in every brother and sister around me? Isn't it possible to cover a transgression and give them a chance to grow and to rise above that? Just because I know something bad that somebody said or did doesn't mean that I have to get on the housetop and proclaim it. That's what Solomon is saying. He that harpeth on a matter, instead of just letting it die out. In chapter 18, he says in verse 6, a fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for stripes. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a whisperer, there's that word again, are as dainty morsels. Think of those nice sweets that our ladies bring in when we have finger foods. You pick one off of the plate. Oh, they're so good. And it's hard to stop with just one. The words of a whisperer are like that, and they go down into the innermost parts. It's like we just can't get enough of that. Proverbs chapter 18. And in verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. We've already seen the principle there, that God has placed such power within us. Proverbs 20 and verse 19, he that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore, company not with him that openeth wide his lips. Young people, if you know a gossiping friend, don't keep company with them. Company not with him that openeth wide his lips. This will come back to bite you every time. Proverbs 26:20, for lack of wood the fire goeth out. Isn't that great? Members of the church, let's just let some of these fires go out. Let's just let them die out. There's no need to throw wood on the fire, because he says, where there is no whisperer, contention ceaseth. Problems go away, and strife. Proverbs 34:13, keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Psalms 141:3, set a watch, O Jehovah, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips. Beautiful prayer. Powerful prayer, asking God to keep our lips sealed. All right, why is gossip so damaging? Let's close with this evening. The first reason I would suggest is that it creates doubt and suspicion among friends. We've already seen this. It's like sowing the seeds of doubt between the best of friends. It weakens or breaks the links of life between brethren. Brightest links of life are broken by a single angry word, and the same is true with regard to gossip and hateful words. Gossip also distorts reality and truth. You just listen to a gossiper and see if you're not getting a false story. It breaches confidentiality and trust. If a friend cares enough about you to share something with you in confidence, the last thing you want to do is spread that to somebody else. Because if your friend is smart, they'll never share another secret with you again. Confidentiality. I like to know that when I share something with someone in confidence, it's not going to go any further. Don't you kind of like that? And it destroys the credibility of the gossiper. It may endanger the safety of and security of other people. You ever heard the phrase, loose lips sink ships? In time of war, slander laws and espionage type violations are are taken very, very seriously, and there's reasons for that. And it leads to other sins like lying. Oh, I didn't really say that. Or cheating, or theft, and many others. It prevents the development of valuable friendships, and it forecloses the possibility of healthy resolution of many small matters, these matters that should have been resolved, and it discourages the proper resolution of problems. These are some of the serious reasons why gossip is so very damaging and so dangerous. Thank you for that great question. It's a reminder to all of us to refrain from gossiping. Make sure what we're saying is productive of good. Are you subject to our Lord's invitation this evening? Have you perhaps been guilty of gossip and slander in your own life? This would be a really good time to make the resolution to put a stop to it right now. And if you need to respond to our Lord's invitation, we stand ready to assist here at the front.